Hey, Moses here. These are 3 reasons why I think that starting a podcasting is so good. Reason number 1, starting a podcast is simply fun and it is rewarding. Here's what I mean. When I get a text or an email, well, I haven't gotten an email yet, but when I get a text or someone replies to an Instagram story reply thingy when I share a clip about how informative or transformative a message that just happened to be part of my podcast episode, how transformative that is to them or how much joy it brought to them, it's just, I don't know how else to describe it, right? I bring on guests to my podcast and they share their expertise, and their expertise touch a particular individual in a certain way, and they share that with me like, hey, this was a great message, it changed how I view this and that. It's like, okay, it's fulfilling, I think, to some extent. So at the very least, there is that transformative element to it, especially when I hear it from an audience. It's good. It's good to hear from my audience when my message reaches them in a specific way. Okay, reason number 2 why I think starting a podcast is a good thing: to grow a loyal audience. Now, I have an entire 3-day course that is actually free. So if you are thinking about starting your own podcast, I have a free podcast challenge community, and there is like 3 lessons in there that you get for free, which is 1, touches on the monetization of podcasting. 2, it touches on how important it is to grow a loyal audience, and podcasts sit in a very specific place when it comes to building a loyal audience. Let me explain. So when you have a podcast, and at least for me, when I listen to a podcast, after some time, like a few episodes, I feel like I'm starting to know the host, right? And podcasting is in a weird space because you can listen to them while you're doing other things. It's a bit hard to like watch a TV while walking your dog. So when you listen to a few episodes, you start to feel like you know the host to a certain extent, right? And of course, depending on the podcast and whatnot. But podcasting is in a unique space when it comes to building a loyal audience that stays with you across time. And I feel like it's a missed opportunity to not leverage podcasting, especially if you're providing good value. Good is subjective in this case, but if you're providing information that is informative and valuable to your audience, it is so easy, quote unquote. It's not easy at all, but if you're providing good value to the right audience, the probability that audience is going to be a loyal audience across time is one of the few channels where you can, one of the few mediums where you can actually leverage that. Okay, and that leads me to the third point, which is, I'm going to look at my notes right now, and that is monetization, right? Monetization, because obviously you're providing value, right? People are finding your messages or how you structure your podcast or the type of guests that you bring onto your podcast. They're finding value in that, and so why not monetize it, right? And so monetization can come in all kinds of different forms. One of them can be crowdfunding, right? The loyal audience that you have built, they can choose to support you, right? Monetarily or just by sharing your podcast in other channels. That is a form of listener support as well. But there's all kinds of different monetization strategies. I left that at last because it is not the important part about starting a podcast. 1, I put joy at the top, right? Joy. I put the joy that I get when I share my podcast, and more specifically, when someone reaches out to me and they're like, hey, thank you for sharing this, or it was good to hear this message from a guest that you had, or from you specifically when you said this and that. It's rewarding, it is fulfilling. I like that. And so I left monetization at last, not because it is the least important, because in the medium to long term, you do want to monetize your podcast. But those are at least three good reasons to want to start a podcast. As I said earlier, if you're trying to challenge yourself and start a podcast, I have a podcast challenge community with 3 free courses in there. The first one is about trying to figure out like why podcasting is a great place, a great way to build a loyal audience, just like I touched on here. And then the second lesson is about how do you monetize podcasts? What are the different means, different ways, different channels of monetizing your podcast? And the third lesson goes into how to design, how to record, and how to publish your own podcast. So if you are in the podcasting space or you want to start your podcast, check out the Podcast Challenge community in the links below. Those have been my 3 cents on why you should start a podcast. All right, that's it. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.